First, thanks Alex, Vinay, and the incredible back team for hosting such an incredible event. It's good to see a lot of friendly faces here. You know, when Alex asked me to host or moderate a panel on the metaverse, two names came to mind, Seb and Mundi. I think they're two of the most unique builders and thinkers on what large-scale open worlds look like. Both have taken, I think, very different approaches to the problem of scaling these sort of worlds. And so I think first, Mundi, Seb, I'd love to hear a little bit about your backgrounds and the audience, I think, as well. So Mundi, you like to start?
Yeah, so my name is Mundi. I'm from Iceland. Many years ago, started to, well, my whole life I always wanted to get into gaming. I did end up doing lots of other stuff, like film and fashion and fine arts and performance and stuff like that. And but always dreamt of making a game. And my co-founder, who was then working at CCP, and we started kind of becoming really good friends at a teenage year, and we really started to think about what would it be, what would the kind of the multi-million player playground look like? Judging from all the problems that we saw with EVE, which is probably the single largest single-shared MMO out there, we kind of started to design around those things, and that's how we started Clang. So yeah, I came from a bit of a different background, and then went into gaming around 26 years old, 35 now. That's that, yeah.
Seb, please.
All right. Hey, everyone. Good to see you here again at Slush. I've been a serial entrepreneur for almost 15 years now. Together with my business partner, Arturo Madrid, we co-founded 3 companies. We had 2 exits, the last one being the acquisition of my game company by Animoca Brands in 2018. I spent 11 years in gaming as well, and I always had this dream since I was first touched video game, like one day I'll make games. But I think I have a more powerful dream now that I want everyone to be able to make games. And so that's what's been driving us since with the inception of the sandbox on mobile. Like, how do we bring and make game creation accessible to anyone with no coding, just by the touch of that finger? And that vision evolved around 2017 as we found about blockchain and NFTs. We've been one of the pioneers in blockchain gaming, and through there, I've started to build Sandbox as more of a decentralized virtual world. Besides being the COO of the Sandbox, I'm also the president of the Blockchain Game Alliance, so I try to support and educate an overall ecosystem, showing how blockchain technology can really enable new use case, new possibilities within the broader video game industry as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Seb, I'd love to hear a little bit more about where Sandbox is today, what it is, maybe some key numbers and stats for the audience.
Happy to share some of the recent metrics, and I think on the topic, what the hell is happening in the metaverse? A lot. Basically, it's not empty at all. Any moment you enter it with your avatar, there's plenty of player. It's fun. You see all those activities, all those emotions. We just passed the 4.3 million users with a wallet, so it's becoming significant since I think there's roughly 100 million wallet right now, people connected with the MetaMask or other solution. We had finished our Alpha Season 3, which has been a 10 weeks long event where people could engage through 98 different experiences. And we had roughly 40,000 active users on a daily basis, of 250,000 MAUs. They spend 20 minutes to 30 minutes in an experience, so it's quite a significant amount of time. Over 16 million visits across all those experiences, and 2.4 million hours spent in it by users. And I didn't count the number of messages around the chats and so on, but activity is there, and it's definitely quite exciting for what's coming next. As we keep building the Sandbox platform.
Can you tell us a little bit about what a player does in the Sandbox and what that looks like today?
Well, so plenty of things, actually. It's true we started with gaming. We provide this tool, the Game Maker, no code, that you can create quests, challenges, and so on. But ultimately, I see Sandbox opening a new format of entertainment that use gamification mechanics like quests, fights, and so on, but expand to other vertical, like we have fashion, we have culture, we have digital art, we have museum and galleries, and soon virtual shows, virtual concerts, and a lot of great diversifying kind of experience. But we use all our experience in gaming to create engagement, to create retention, to make people want to come back, socialize with other users, complete quests, get better timing on the leaderboard, and so on, which it's probably one of the things that makes Sandbox a bit different from the other virtual worlds as well.
Yeah, awesome, thank you. Mundi, I think a lot of the audience doesn't know much about Seed. You guys have been in stealth for a long time. I'd love to hear a little bit more about where Seed is at today, what it is actually for the audience, and why you've been hiding it for so long from us.
Yeah, so like I said, we to pick up where I left the first question, we started, me and my two other co-founders from CCP actually started to think about, what would a game, how could a game work that had, multiple million players in it, and first of all, if you look, we started looking at games with a large number of players, like MMOs, and what we see there is when a lot of people come together, it's usually a complete mess. You have, countless usernames across the screen. The game usually lags or breaks.
What's the best example of that?
I think, just as early as Ultima or WoW or even RuneScape, but the marketplace in RuneScape is kind of a clusterfuck. It's like, I used to love RuneScape when I was growing up, but the moment where everybody comes together is usually, it's for a market or a concert. It's like those are the two kind of verticals there. I think the market becomes very messy, obviously, when a lot of people. So obviously, what we saw in EVE was a very organized and very advanced player market, and that really escalated and scaled up the EVE experience. Also, of course, EVE being single shard meant that it could handle, tens of thousands of people interacting with the same market, very different from what we've seen in other MMOs. But every time, like Albion, I've been playing a little bit, every time players gather, it's just a complete mess. And so what we were trying to solve for was really like, what can large groups in the same location look like? And of course, we see that in real life every day. If you go out on the street in your hometown, there's countless people walking around, and it's all in organized fashion. So that's when we started thinking, what if simulation was the answer here? If your character was simulated, then we would solve a lot of the problems. Because with a fully controllable character, you have this online, offline volatility, right?
A lot of people compare it to The Sims, right?
Yes, in a way, it's very. We draw a lot of learnings from The Sims. So your characters, you have multiple of them, like you have in The Sims, and they are AI-driven. And this allows us to introduce lots of gameplay that Sims is also famous for, like going to sleep or going on a date at a restaurant. Like those are things we don't normally do in games, but because like nobody likes to sit in a chair stuck to a desk when they're playing a character. However, in a simulation game, you start to perceive all of that stuff very differently. So Seed is about, kind of how do we crack putting, millions of people together, creating these massively large simulations that are fully persistent. So your characters actually live in the game whether you're playing or not. And yeah, we think we can kind of crack the problem, and with that, crack a lot of the network effect problems that I think gaming has been struggling to solve for a long time.
That's awesome. I think one of the most interesting things about this panel is how different both of your journeys have been. I think how different what you're building is. Seb, I'd love to get your thoughts on maybe the differences and similarities with Seed, where you guys have approached things similarly and maybe differently.
I think like it's really interesting to hear like what is Seed proposing, like this permanent simulation of life that keep continuing even when you're not there anymore as a player. It's something like ultimately we would like to see in Sandbox as well. Like what makes Sandbox and what makes the Metaverse so special is like it's an avatar-centric experience. Like you enter it with an avatar, you meet other players and socialize with that avatar, and you keep on going through all those different experiences, all those different lands with the same avatar. So your identity follows you. That actually is not new. That's very different from what we are seeing right now in the PC gaming or mobile gaming, where like every new game you start, you refresh and you start from scratch your identity. And it's true, like even though you have this ubiquity of your identity and you can have one or multiple avatars, once you're not logged in, like all that life stops basically.
Yes.
And that's, I think, where it could be like an interesting perspective in the future, like how do we have models of AI and how do we keep being online and evolving while we are not there physically behind a computer or a mobile device controlling that avatar, and how does that continue offering specific opportunity both on the creative side, on the gameplay side, but also potentially economically, as like this whole metaverse is also like an open economy behind of services, of jobs, and so on.
That's awesome. Mundi, is there anything that you particularly like about Sandbox that you guys have maybe done similarly or maybe very differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think the products are miles apart. I do like with Sandbox the fact that it is a platform where like you as a content creator could potentially get paid. I think if you look at YouTube, Spotify, and things like that, there's some similarities there. I think maybe that's been put too much in the forefront, so you end up with a kind of when you think about Sandbox, you constantly think about tokenomics and the sand token, stuff that like probably like 90% of the user base shouldn't be thinking about. So I think that's some of the learnings. I think for us is like how do we make sure that we don't alienate kind of the average user who's never going to earn really money from the game, from those and still empower those content creators to come in and really drive up the content because it is ultimately. I think, the metaverse, and I really kind of despise that term a lot. But if it is anything, I mean, for us, it was really early on. We were always thinking, we can't just call it an MMO because it is very different. Like MMO, you always connect to like World of Warcraft or some RuneScape or some like typical guy with a sword running around in the hills killing goblins. And we've seen countless versions of that, and they're always sharded down to like, I think the World of Warcraft shard is about 12,000 users per shard. And so it means like you have thousands of shards. You've broken all the user base into all these countless different little pockets. And if you compare that to a social network, then obviously that would be a very shitty social network. If like you were on like a different shard than me using Twitter or Facebook or whatever, like that would suck. But that's where games are still very much today. And so I think that also very caps their network effects and their ability to scale to the same scale we've seen in social networks.
So I want to double click on that point. I think that's really important. I think Matt Ball talks a lot about how the metaverse over time will have kind of this massive level of concurrency of millions of people at the same time. I think you guys have worked on a lot of this over the last 5 to 6 years. Tell me a little bit more about solving that technical problem, how you guys tackled it. I know that's been a big part of the roadmap for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, for us, I mean, obviously, we got Oddur, who was the tech lead on the EVE cluster, to come and work with us, and we also partnered with a company in the UK called Improbable, and we're kind of on the bleeding edge of backend technology to get there, and I think that's one of the. There are ways though to do that more simply than what we're trying to do. I guess like Sandbox is sharded, right? Or
we're like server authoritative, instance-based, so basically like 40 users per instance, and it's scaled vertically infinitely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes, I think there are obviously for each different game project you need different solutions. I think what we are trying to solve is the kind of massive get this feeling that everybody's in the same world and it's very crowded and happening and busy because. What I've seen from these player-created communities, I mean, I've seen beautiful cities built in Minecraft. They're constantly empty, and there's this loneliness and emptiness that seeps into the cracks of these experiences. And so, how do you solve that without AI? And that was kind of like where I think a lot of the solutions were.
So maybe if I can jump on this point, like for us, it's a combination of design and technology, like how to approach it. Like on the design side, I think like what really matters is like your social graph. Like with smart matchmaking, you want to jump either in like the same shards or servers where like your friends are. So you want to be able to follow your friends, to join them instantly into their instance where they are, to know if they are in social hub or in a game. So this kind of experience should be seamless. and that's coming on Sandbox roadmap. On the other side, like how many people can you like meaningfully connect with within a virtual world? Like having 10,000 people around you, for me, is more noise than actual interaction. Like there is.
I mean, if you think about it though, like you have, like in TikTok, right, you have like 50 million likes on some post you like. It doesn't mean that it's noisy or crowded. It's just the way you, I guess.
But it depends really at the kind of interaction you see. Like a like is like a half a second click, and that's it.
An example. Yeah.
Where you are in the virtual world, like you have to think like in terms of like space, in terms of movement, into point of attention for people. So where you control your avatar, you don't want to have like 10,000 people moving all around and taking your attention out of like what really matters. And so far, most of the studies show like the size, the ideal size of the social graph of how many humans you can interact with at the same time is around 100 people around you. After that, it's hard. You cannot like recognize face, recognize their name, or so unless you design specific interaction for this crowd, like Improbable have been doing with other sides, like, oh, we all attack, we give orders, and everyone follows. But how long is it going to be fun to play when like we're just becoming part of a crowd, like bees or birds, versus like individuality? And I don't have the answer to those questions.
No, I've had this conversation countless times. I think again, like, any game where you freely control your character is going to be a chaotic mess if you put 10,000 people together in a group. And the best version of that experience is concerts. That's where we've seen like countless concerts in the Metaverse. And but yeah, that's why I think. However, you know, if me and David are walking down the street in New York, there's probably 1 million people around us, but it doesn't ruin our experience, right? So it actually enhances like the New York experience. So it does depend a lot on your frame of reference there, I think. And I mean, again, like if you look at social networks, you would never want to be kind of on your own lonely island, only with your friends, disconnected from the rest of the social network. So I think that the social networks, you know, they are able to give us the feeling that we are kind of connecting to the global billion players. Of course, you don't technically do that, but that feeling, I think, is quite important for people because at least, you know, I've quit many MMOs just out of, you know, kind of not feeling like I'm in something meaningful. Like, I think the kind of the feeling of being where everybody is or like connected to where humanity is focusing on is very important to us as a species for some reason. And I think we miss a lot of that in games because we're always kind of, you know, putting people in those little pockets and not connecting everybody together into. I mean, I do think actually like esport games are probably better at this than MMOs. Like, because if you play League of Legends, even though you're in a little shard of you know 5 players, 10 players, you feel still very connected to the global meta. But there's no game outside of, I would say, EVE and maybe Albion that have kind of cracked the reversed version of that, where the game actually expands with its user base, which is a challenging thing anyway.
That's why it's both like design and technology challenge, and it's way different than just like the traditional game design we've seen until today, where I just need a core loop and a meta gameplay and that's it. So it's context based as well, but
for sure,
I agree.
On this topic of social networks, I think, Mundi, the first time you and I met, you said something to me that stuck with me for a long time, which is, you know, you didn't think your competition was other games or other MMOs. It was other social platforms. It was Facebook, it was Twitter, it was Instagram. People talk about the metaverse a lot, but people also talk about games as a social network a lot. How important is that thesis, games as a social network, to the kind of quote-unquote metaverse concept?
So so the metaverse concept is completely undefined. Nobody knows, you know. I think the winner of whatever is happening is going to be called, that's the metaverse. That's how it was always meant to be, kind of thing. But I think, you know, the social network aspect is hugely important. I think people are moving away from social networks into games, and they're losing something there in that shift. They're losing a lot of kind of. And I mean, social networks have started to really suck at connecting us, actually. They've become so ad-driven that they actually kind of don't benefit from you connecting with people. And so, you know, the majority of they're kind of migrating to becoming social media platforms, more like YouTube or like TikTok and YouTube are very similar products, if you think about it. It's people creating content, and they get paid through advertisement, and then there are other people that are watching that content. And I mean, it's pretty much the same for YouTube. There was a day where social networks were kind of interesting, where there was a lot of connectivity and people felt very engaged, and my mom was posting photos of her spaghetti bolognese, which completely has stopped, right? I mean, I'm still today, don't post anymore, because either you kind of do it as a very serious competitive social networking person where you need to get a certain amount of likes or followers to stay relevant or meaningful in the network. And if you're not, it actually starts to become quite humiliating, even though you're just an average normal person.
Yep.
Like if you don't get your 100+ likes, like it's kind of like, okay, everybody can see that you're a loser in society pretty much.
Yeah.
So there's something very flawed about how social networks are doing it. There is obviously, games are not doing it at all, and so we're left up with very limited, actually, choices, I would say, today about how to connect or like find new communities and connect. I think Discord is probably the best, but it's like, hyper hardcore. So yeah, if we can solve that in games, which I think, like, if you look at kids, and of course, coming generations are going to be more and more gamey. If we solve there in cahoots with that, like a social network problem, I think that's a really big opportunity.
Awesome.
Oh, sorry.
Well,
my answer's too long.
One thing to jump in, like ultimately, I still think like the Metaverse, we have a definition of it, like this myriad of virtual world that users can move from one to another with the identity they own and all their digital assets. But ultimately, what we'll find in it is like whatever people want to make with it, basically. Like we're here to provide tools, to inspire, to start showcasing possibilities, but we don't know the ultimate answers. Like, and that's why it's so important to also like as early as possible, like inspire, provide tools, and get to see the creativity that comes from the crowd, from the user-generated content.
Amazing, thank you guys. We have time for a couple of questions for our Metaverse panelists. So just raise your hand if you have a question for either of these three people. We have one here in the front. And just give me a show of hands for anyone else, just so I can calculate time-wise. Okay, great.
Hey guys, so just a quick question about the Metaverse. So we often see a lot of people like conflate gaming with the Metaverse. So is there like a fundamental difference between the two? Or is it like do they intertwine, or is one narrative driven and the other not? So I just want to get your thoughts on like if there's any difference or what you think about that.
Again, I don't think the concept Metaverse is defined enough to like say what if it's going to be a big game that wins the kind of the race now, then it's going to be a game. If it is something else, then it's going to be something else. So I think inherently the Metaverse topic is very loosely defined. That's my take on it. But yeah, I guess you may disagree.
I would really see the Metaverse like almost like the internet. Like it's this myriad of worlds, this myriad of places that we can connect with an avatar. So it's like mostly 3D and spatial, and that notion of like being able to move and take all your identity, all your digital asset, all your currency, all your experience that you acquired, or your reputation even from one to another. So we finally break the barrier of like having a lot of like siloed, centralized walled garden places.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a beautiful definition, and I would love to see that come to fruition. And I think we all have our theories about what the Metaverse is. I do agree in a way that it should be the negative space between a lot of companies, and not one company kind of owning all of the negative space between all the companies. So if anything, I would hope for that to happen. But like I say, it's very much still in the making, and nobody knows where it's going to end up.
Thank you, guys. Anyone else here in the room? We have one here, and then I think that might be it.
Thank you very much, guys. So maybe two questions. Is it possible? Only one? Ah, damn. Okay. So then would like to ask a question regarding the user acquisition and the mass adoption. How do you guys plan on long-term user acquisition and actually retention of the users? Because as from last week from the Decentraland, I've seen that there are like pretty emptiness and loneliness in there. And are you planning on onboarding more like users on the behalf from brands, from tier 1 brands? And also, how do you gonna tackle the issue that those brands, tier 1 brands, they want to actually to have a white label solution rather than go, be in your ecosystem? Thank you.
I think this one's for you.
Okay, I can jump in quick. So a few things, like what drives people in the metaverse is content and experience. It's not the technology, it's not the economic promise of it. It's like, I want to have fun, I want to discover new things. So what we do is like we attract a lot of brands and we try to reach through the fans by offering something new that is meaningful for the fan of those brands. Second thing is when you think about what is Web3, Web3 is basically users owning like all their data in wallet and taking that data across their whole lifetime. So it's a way different way to consider like CRM and how we're going to target and acquire users, because we can address them based on the community they belong to. We can address them by airdropping them content or allowing more utility for the existing content that they own, which is called interoperability. And for me, it's one of the strongest value proposition of Web3 and the metaverse in general.
Okay, we have one more over there. Please keep it concise.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hey, can you hear me? Hey, yeah, so I'm very excited for like the open metaverse, as Sandbox put it. And, you know, we are in the business of connecting fashion brands, luxury brands to the open metaverse. And Sandbox is one of our partners, so full disclose. But, so I want to ask about a different topic, actually, regarding the decentralization of these open metaverse. Because Decentraland, for example, they are very decentralized. You know, everything needs to be voted. But then we work with them and they are super slow. And then we work with the Sandbox, they're centralized, so they're very fast. So, but long term, do you guys have any plan regarding like, turning over the decentralization aspect, and how would you continue to work with brands wanting to come to the open metaverse with a decentralized model, because the decentralized model is not working? All right, thanks.
All right. Oh, I can jump in again. Well, the beauty of what Decentraland has done is like they went very fast to exit to community. Basically, like they gave ultimately the whole power decision toward like the DAO that runs, and the DAO runs like all the decision regarding like attribution of grant and so on. So in a way, like it's only the community of landowners and mana holders in Decentraland that get to decide which are the new projects and so on. Even though it's decentralized, if you look more deeply into the metrics, like how many people own mana or own land and take those decisions, it's a smaller subset. So how do you make sure that smaller subset is always engaged into like having fast decision process is one of the challenge of like usually most of the DAOs, actually, not specifically Decentraland. The model of Sandbox is like a progressive decentralization where we want to make sure that there is enough content, there is enough activity going on and users and engagement, back to the previous question, before like, we fully hand over that power to the community. And the second thing we've been focusing is we have a lot more like decentralization in the number of landowners and people who are going to decide, so that it's hopefully, and we don't know yet because we're all experimenting, but we're seeing the difference between like very fast exit to decentralization versus a bit longer term exit to decentralization.
Thank you guys very much.
Yeah, just to comment on that, just briefly, like I do think like a large corporation being fully autonomous is something like we won't see in the next, I don't know how long. I don't want to say numbers. But I think some of these terms that we use to define like these products that are up and coming, like decentralized or what kind of tokenomics, these are very hardcore terms for the average user that most of them don't care, right? So it's not going to be the competitive edge that companies need to think about heading into this war. It's not going to be like how decentralized, because the community that deeply cares about that is still so small compared to like. And I don't know, I haven't seen like, I've seen some shift for people that are maybe tax savvy and they head it towards decentralization. But, if you think about the mass market, your mom, your little brother, do they really care? And is the decentralizing factor that is going to make your product so much harder to technically deliver on, going to give you that extra competitive advantage against those who, may just skip that and then, later talk about it? Yeah, sorry. Okay. Okay. Very clear signal.
We're going to wrap this one up here. Please give these guys a huge round of applause. Thank you very, very much.